People start businesses every day, and everyday businesses succeed and some fail. Why is that? What's the secret to scaling successfully versus never getting an idea off the ground? A lot of it has to do with having a great idea. A lot of it has to do with grit and perseverance. And a lot of it has to do with smart and timely marketing. Hello, I'm Lori Jones, host of the Integrate and Ignite podcast. On today's show, my guest, author, and entrepreneur, Elaine Pofeldt, and I talk about the entrepreneurial spirit and the risk-taking mindset that it takes to succeed. We will talk about her two books, The $1 Million One-Person Business, which focuses on solopreneurs achieving seven-figure success, and Tiny Business, Big Money, which explores businesses that are in the process of growing beyond being a one-person show. And we'll discuss giving up affiliation with big brands. We'll clear up some misconceptions about entrepreneurship and tons more. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Integrate and Ignite podcast. I am so excited to have Elaine Pofeldt join us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's great to be here. I'm a big fan of the work that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And me of you as well. Tell us a little bit about your journey and about the new book that you've just written.
Sure. Well, I've been a journalist for many years, and I specialize in entrepreneurship and careers. And I've written two books. One is called The $1 Million One-Person Business, which looks at solopreneurs getting to seven figures. And then my new book, Tiny Business, Big Money, looks at the businesses at the stage where they're starting to grow beyond being a one-person business. They have small teams. Maybe they're becoming a small business or a traditional startup, or they're even positioning themselves to get acquired. And it's been a lot of fun to be on the front lines of this area of business. It hasn't been covered that much, surprisingly, but it's the area where we have more businesses in the US than any other kind of business.
It is. And during COVID in 2020, more new businesses were started up than any other time in American history. And I think a lot of it just had to do with the change in mindset about work-life balance. I mean, all these, unique situations that placed people into an area of asking themselves, there's got to be, or saying to themselves, there's got to be a better way.
I agree with you, Lori. I think people did a lot of deep thinking about what really mattered to them. And not all of those people necessarily quit their job to go full-time with their business, but the fact that so many people are getting experience with running a business is very exciting, because it means they have that option if they want to. And when you have a traditional job, but you have the option of leaving if you want or need to, that changes the whole equation. It really empowers the individual to do what's best for them. I think we also had the perfect storm in a positive perfect storm, because people weren't commuting.
Right.
They had those extra half hour to 2 hours a day, or maybe more if you live in California or somewhere like that, where they're not sitting in their car, so they could actually work on a business. And it'll be really interesting to see 10 years from now what happens as a result of that boom in new business creation.
I agree. And the stats are alarming. Within 5 years, most new businesses, a large percentage of new businesses fail. So it will be interesting to see if if we were able to just breed a new form of entrepreneurialism, with people just saying to themselves, there's got to be a different way. It will be really interesting to look back on that. What was it that, so entrepreneurialism is niche from a journalism standpoint. What was it that led you to such a niche area and interest?
Oh, that's a good question. I was a general assignment reporter early in my career, working in Jersey City and Patterson. One of my beats was the Hudson County Jail.
I love it.
And it was
okay. I'm trying to connect the dots there between jail and entrepreneurialism. I cannot wait for you to finish this story.
Well, I got burned out on it after about 7 years, and I wanted to do something fun. So I got a job as a fashion features editor at Women's Wear Daily. Could not be more
cool.
diametrically.
WWD.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to runway shows and things. It was a lot of fun. And I got to know some designers. And what I realized was some of them really had great creative gifts, but they were not able to bring them to the world because they didn't have financing, or they didn't have a good business plan, or they didn't have good distribution. So I got kind of interested in the business side of things, something I never really thought I would be interested in. And then I had an opportunity to join the staff of Success magazine, which is about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And there was just something about the atmosphere there. It was just infectious. Scott DeGarmo was the editor at the time, and he just loved entrepreneurship. And I somehow I got the bug, and I found I really enjoyed covering entrepreneurs. Compared to corporate business, I felt like they're not very buttoned up. They really tell you the truth and are very candid. And I just got hooked on it. And that was a long time ago at this point. The book came about. I worked at Fortune Small Business Magazine for about 8 years. I was running their website at one point. I was on the staff of the magazine. And then I had children, and I have 4 children now. At the time, I had 3 children who were ages 4 and under, twins, and then another baby. And I
You
felt
were
like
busy.
I was a little busy.
Talk
And
about fortune.
Yeah, it was logistics, like
Yeah.
working mothers. And I felt like, you know what, I have all these things I love, a great family and a career that I love. I love working with these colleagues, but I'm not enjoying any of it because my schedule is stretched so thin, and
Right.
so I decided to go freelance. And I started doing a variety of different assignments, and the $1 Million One Person Business came out of blogging for Forbes. Total accident, by the way. I was
Serendipity is usually what happens.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I was looking for ideas when I was on deadline. I had to do 5 blogs a month, and I was up to blog number 5. And I think it was Memorial Day weekend. And I was Googling around for inspiration, and I came across these Census Bureau statistics about the non-employer business. And you can always tell how something is viewed when you see the word non in front of it.
Yeah.
and I thought, well, these numbers are kind of interesting, because I noticed that there were solopreneurs that were getting to 1 million or more, and some were getting to 5 million or more.
Right.
And I got curious, and I like data, and I started slicing and dicing the data, and I saw that they were in all different industries. It wasn't confined to just tech startups or anything like that. And I published a blog post just about the data, and it got over 200,000 page views. And people were writing to me, curious about who the businesses were. And then I started hearing from some of the businesses, and about a year later, it was a glacial pace. I had 5 of them to write about, and I put up this post with their stories. And it was Alan Walton, who ran an online spy camera shop, Rachel Tralupski, who ran a babysitting service from her BlackBerry with something like 2,000 babysitters. God knows how she did it.
Goodness.
Dan Mezaritsky, a fitness trainer who licensed people in his methodology. There was Peter Leeds, was a financial planner with a newsletter that was well subscribed, et cetera. And that one got over 300,000 views. And I'd written thousands of articles at that point, because I've been at this for a long time, and I never had that kind of a quick and instant response with so much enthusiasm to any topic I'd covered. And so I realized there was a real demand for this in the marketplace. People wanted this information. And I started, every time I found one of them, and it was very slow, I would write about them. This was back in about 2012. And maybe 3 or 4 years into it, an agent noticed, and she thought it could be a book. And I kind of had that in the back of my mind. And I was actually starting to do some book ghostwriting for entrepreneurs, but I didn't really think of myself as doing it. And then when she planted that seed in my mind, I said, okay, let's go for it. And that became the $1 Million One Person Business. And it's really been fun. I've gotten to meet, maybe, I would say, 60 or 70 of them now. And there are a number that are, I call them tiny businesses, that are a little bit bigger, like maybe they have 1 employee, generally less than 5.
Right.
And they just have evolved to the point where they need to have someone on staff, and they really do things differently. It's very interesting to watch.
Well, so let's talk about, some of the individuals that you wrote about when you were with Success and Forbes and Fortune magazine. versus, the entrepreneur, right? Versus the solopreneur. And what are the key differences from your point of view about those two, mindsets, if you will?
I think it's all about scale. I think, I worked for a long time with Vern Harnish, who's the author of Scaling Up, and
Yeah.
he founded EO. And I know a lot of YPOers, and a lot of people have that type of vision for their business where they would really like to impact millions of people. The $1 million one-person businesses are driven by a different kind of desire for excellence, which is they want to excel in their subject matter area, or they want to run a great boutique business, or they want to plant the seeds for a business that can scale, but they don't necessarily want to do it in the traditional ways.
Right.
There are people that want to go that if you really want to scale, you have to raise capital.
Mm-hmm.
And do it the Silicon Valley way. And that way structurally doesn't work for a lot of entrepreneurs for various reasons. I mean, sometimes it's that I had a program yesterday, and one of the dads became quite emotional about, he actually had raised some private capital. He didn't want to do that because he wanted time with his young children. And they really value their lifestyle, and they are willing to put that first above the glory of building a unicorn. They still want to scale and they're ambitious, but not at the cost of their personal lives. And for some people, they can go the conventional route and not lose their personal life. If you're in the demographic that whole world is designed for, you probably have a lot of support in other areas of your life to kind of protect your lifestyle.
Right.
But if you're not, like, for instance, if you're a woman and you have young children, in many families, I don't want to say all because people have different arrangements, that could be very hard to go on that time frame. They do have time frames for when they want to do the different rounds and when they want to have an exit. And a lot of times women, when they have younger children or parents, they have to be on a slower track. So it just isn't compatible. It's not that the system doesn't want them. It's just, it doesn't work. There's sort of a disconnect.
And I look at my own situation. We have 4 kids as well. And, we're talking about solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and control is one thing that is very, very nice. And being able to, we were a lifestyle business for a very, very long time, always well over $1 million. But that lifestyle allowed me to leave at 3:00 to go get the kids. Or if I had a meeting, my father would leave at 3:00 and go get the kids. It allowed him to travel the world and hunt and fish. It allowed me to be a mom. But then when the time allowed and I was able to scale the business, it was in the palm of my hands, the control of knowing when it was going to be time to scale was something that was very deliberate. And I don't think that a lot of people realize that going into this, that it is okay to scale slower or grow slower so that you can still have that lifestyle. In my situation, my MOM title versus my CEO title, that is so important.
I wish I had a little clip of what you just said, Lori, because you just said it so well. I agree with you. It doesn't mean they're not ambitious, and
right.
yet they just have a different time frame. And I've thought a lot about this. I think what the Great Resignation is really who gets to control our time. Is it us or is it someone else? And all the fighting about back to the office is about that. And I think a lot of people thought a lot about life during the pandemic, and they're saying, my control over my own time is more important than anything else, because when I have that, I can be the person that I want to be. I can contribute to my family in the ways that I want, my community. I can be a whole person. I can be healthier. They just don't want to cede that control to an employer anymore. And the smart employers are realizing that and saying, hey, let us work with you.
Right.
And let you do some lifestyle design within the bounds of having an employer-employee relationship. It is a little different than having your own business, but they're becoming very flexible because they realize people really want that and need that right now, especially after what everybody's collectively been through. That was like a massive trauma for society around the world. Never really had anything like that in recent history. And people have really changed their outlook. And I think it's an opportunity to remake some of these organizations and make them better. But it's also an opportunity for people to do what you were talking about earlier, which is if they wanted to try starting a business, do it. Why not? It's so much easier than it's ever been. I remember maybe 15 years ago, I think was when cloud computing really caught on. And
Yeah.
I was talking with a venture capitalist, and he was saying how hard it was to find deals to invest in because the startups didn't need as much money. And if he wasn't putting in a lot of money, there wasn't much of a return because they didn't need the servers anymore. And there's going to be young people listening to this podcast who don't remember that, when every startup had to have this expensive server.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have ChatGPT. We have so many innovations that are coming out that are lowering the barriers to entry to doing a startup or a small business or a one-person business. It's becoming available to all. It wasn't always, because you had to have access to capital. And now that's becoming less of a factor, and it's democratizing the whole pool of who can be an entrepreneur. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for entrepreneurship to become part of everyone's toolkit, to be used or not used when they want.
Well, and one of the reasons why is it brings innovation along with it, and a mindset that is so scrappy to get anything done at any cost, especially cost being in air quotes when you don't have money. I mean, it's a totally different mindset and grit. One of the things that I think is really interesting in kind of comparing and contrasting where you are today and back to some of the newsrooms of those very large publications in their day, is the mindset of a small business and the importance it provides society versus a large business and its importance. And the glamour is always surrounding the larger business. Why is it that society accepts that?
I think it's a shorthand for credible. When you see a big brand, if someone says they work at Apple, for instance, you think, oh, they must be a pretty good software developer if they work at Apple. It just makes it easier for us to understand who someone else is. Whether or not that's accurate is another question, but we're so rushed and busy with things fighting for our attention. That's one of the hard parts when you go out on your own. I remember calling up and saying I was from Fortune Small Business was very different from calling and saying, this is Elaine Pofeldt, I'm a freelance writer. It was different. I was still the same person with the exact same capabilities, but it took me a while to get used to it and to just be confident in that. And it became a gift to be independent, I found, because I am an independent thinker. And when you're part of one of those organizations and you have a lot of ideas, you always tailor them to what that organization needs. But when you're out on your own, you can serve a variety of clients. So if you have a great idea that one person doesn't like or can't use, you can always go to another one. And it allows so much more creative expression and professional expression. I didn't really realize that at the time. So when I had that trade-off of giving up the big brand in favor of just being me, that turned out to be a blessing. And it turned out I was affiliated with a lot of big brands as somebody who served them, but it wasn't just one, it was multiple.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting as you're reflecting on my question, and I'm reflecting on it as well. You said something that really sparked, just a point of view that I want to share. And we have hired all walks of life in this agency. We've been in business 43 years. We've truly stood the test of time. And it's an incredible company serving incredible brands, and 1,200 startup brands, by the way, throughout that time period. And when we hired team members at very early on in our careers, I was always looking for the big brand experience, a big agency experience, or they came from a big corporate comms department or something like that. Within 30 to 60 days, I realized how little those individuals knew compared to
someone who was brought up through a small company or a small agency. And it goes back to exactly what you're talking about the knowledge having to be so broad compared to something that was so vertical. And to me, small business breeds incredible innovation and mindset and grit and roll up your sleeves versus, sit back and wait for someone, to get the job done for you.
I agree with you. It's, it depends on the individual. Sometimes you'll have a sort of scrappy person within a big company who's almost like a little business within the company. But having that smaller agency experience or indie experience really does teach you a lot. And I think the primary thing you learn, other than the subject matter expertise, is how to think like a business owner. Because when you're, one of 5 employees, you have a big impact on whether that business survives, and if you waste money or go after the wrong business or make mistakes that cost the company money, it could cost you your job. So you're much more mindful of that. And I think when you go on to the next agency, you bring that with you. Or if you had your own business, you're very well aware of things like, is this client somebody who can never be pleased and I'm just spinning my wheels, or like, is this a non-paying client, or the things that a business owner will think about. You always want to serve all your clients really well, but sometimes you have to look at these things objectively, like a CFO, and say, is this worth it? Is this even profitable? And that's what those employees will bring to you, is that ability to toggle between being extremely creative and also having that business hat on.
It's ownership thinking versus that renter mindset. You know what I mean? They're there to really help impact the bottom line and growth, and they want to be a part of growth. Whether or not it's a catapulted sort of growth where you double in size year over year, where we see a lot of tech companies, they can manage that, especially SaaS organizations versus a service organization, which is totally different. Managing 10% is a lot at our size, a lot for us to grow through. So as I was reading some of our pre-meeting or pre-discussion materials, and a lot of just this vision that you've created for a lot of people, not just, they may not label themselves an entrepreneur, but they're going to read their book and say, that's me. I was just really drawn into the mindset and what it takes to scale a business. There's so many different operational components involved in it. And if you've got like a franchise model, which some people decide, okay, I need the backbone, I need an operational backbone. I'm going to not start my own company. I'm going to be an entrepreneur, but I'm going to go into a franchise model. And then there are, just a lot of tech startups, or the AmFams, the insurance companies that are very, very happy just being a 1 or 2 person organization. So let's isolate our thinking to companies outside of that really want to grow. They've got scale as a part of the DNA, as a part of the roadmap. And what is it that you see most that causes most businesses within, they don't have the backbone of a corporate office or a franchise to succeed? And then why do they fail?
I think it comes down to the people. I've just interviewed so many company owners and people that work in companies, and usually the problem, if they fail, has to do with people. It's, maybe the company is confused about its core values, or there's something toxic in the company. It can be things like that. Like it could be a leader who doesn't know how to listen and isn't really empowering the team members to contribute to the conversation. Maybe they think they are, but they're really not. That's usually,
I agree.
It's sometimes cash is an issue. You can sometimes have a really wonderful person leading a company with a lot of vision who's a little disorganized, and they just, maybe they sell a lot of work or products, but they don't have the cash flow to fulfill. Sometimes that can be an issue. Sometimes customer service is like they outpace their ability to provide good customer service, and that can bite them too. But I think businesses really come down to people, and it doesn't matter what size business it is. you could be a one-person business and have contractors and just be horrible to your contractors and not pay them. And that can cause you to fail because they're going to desert you and go work for someone who treats them right.
Yeah, there's wonderful write-ups around the fact that people leave managers, not the business. So it's all about that interpersonal relationship that you have or don't have within the organization. I know with, from the standpoint of working with many, many entrepreneurs over time, that many of them believe that their product is going to sell itself. And they believe that the marketing is either not needed or that word of mouth is going to do the job that they need in order to scale. Talk to us, and you talk in the book about really, some grassroots approaches, scrappy marketing that really helps companies grow. Share some of those insights and even stories, if you will, about some of the people that you've interviewed. Sure.
Well, it starts with doing the right research up front. I know Brooklinen, for instance, they were a husband and wife team that started a direct to consumer sheets business, but they raised a lot of venture capital. They scaled up. But when I met them, they were really a very small business, just operating out of their apartment in Brooklyn, New York. And they went on the floor of big box stores and talked to people about how much they would be willing to pay for sheets and where they saw the gaps in the marketplace. And they realized that most sheets were aimed at women with floral prints and things like that. And there weren't many that sold sheets that men would like too, or that would pick out on their own. So they started offering things like window pane plaids and things like that. And so they did the legwork first. And I think a lot of people bypass that. They feel like, oh, this is my vision, and I got to go great guns with this. But slowing down enough to get feedback can really help. And I'll get to the marketing in a moment, but I think this is a critical part of it. Another company that I wrote about in Tiny Business, Big Money was called Pink Colada, and it was started by—
That's a great name.
Oh my God, it's a bikini company. Oh my God, and she scaled too. She makes like athletic bikinis, basically. She was a medical student who lived in Melbourne, Australia, and knew that women had wardrobe malfunctions in the waves and stuff, and wanted a bikini that looked great but also stayed on. And
that's a good point.
yeah. And she tested it. What she did was she found a factory on Alibaba, had them make one sample, took a picture of it, put it on Instagram, and then used Facebook ads to drive people. And she took pre-orders. She put up a little store so that she could get the money to make the bikinis, and she got 1,000 orders. She went to this factory. That's a small run for a factory, but they had agreed ahead of time to do a small run for her because they were a smaller, newer factory. And that's what she did with every single product. And she never made a single bikini that people didn't pre-order. And this is how she still runs the business. And now she has employees. It was just her for a while. And that's a really smart way to do it, is just see not what people say they're willing to buy, but just see what they really are willing to buy. So then let's say you've done those things. There are a lot of other things you can do. I know.
Let's stay there for one second, because I just presented at a Startup Week event, and I did a bunch of research on why startup businesses fail. And the number one thing was research. They don't invest time, resources, or money in understanding the customer behavior and understanding the marketplace and the competitors out there. Why is it? I mean, you've got two great stories of great market research, and it took them just going out and talking to people or testing things to learn more. Why do most entrepreneurs think that they can just skip that?
I think there are a lot of misconceptions about entrepreneurship. It's similar to when I work with people ghostwriting their books. You have to ask yourself, who wants to read this book? Who needs to read this book? Same thing about a product, like who actually wants it, and sit there and really think about it. And like with a book, I know just from my own work that generally, if you're going to sell a commercially published book, you need to sell 15,000 copies for the publisher to be made whole for their part of the investment.
Wow.
I sit down with people and I say, let's break this down. Who are the 15,000 people? And they're like, oh, I know lots of people. We're like, okay, well, where are they? Let's break
Yeah.
that down. What organizations are you part of? Can you realistically approach them? And would they actually tout the book? Would they invite you to speak? Would you be allowed to sell the book? Do you do speaking? That would be where you can charge money for it, and the book is part of it. You can do the same with a product, but it's having the discipline and courage to sit down and say, really, who are these people? I don't know if 15,000 is the number for a specific business, but they're probably in your industry, you can do the math to see if you could make a profitable business out of this. And I think sometimes people are almost afraid of hurting their own feelings, that the world isn't ready for their idea. The way I look at it is sometimes you can be too early to market with things, or maybe there's just some slight tweak that you can make that will make it more appealing to people, like those bikinis. Like maybe if Anna got feedback that people like the style, but they don't like the print, maybe she would just change it. It doesn't mean that she's a failed entrepreneur. It means that there was something she overlooked or didn't know, or maybe she has unique tastes in something, not looking at it as a judgment on you and your value as a human being, but just an idea that you put out there that can benefit from feedback from other people, because a business is really in conversation with customers and potential customers. If you're not willing to have the conversation because you're too afraid of rejection, then you can't be a successful entrepreneur. A big part of entrepreneurship is learning how to have a thick skin and not personalize things. And honestly, it takes a lot of work, even as a writer. It's like sometimes people are so incredibly mean, and you can't even believe another human being can be that mean when you're putting yourself out there, making yourself so vulnerable. But there are people that are like that, and who knows, they just have low energy or negative energy. You have to just look past it, or maybe you caught them on the wrong day. If you want to be a good entrepreneur, whether it's a one-person business owner or a scalable business owner, you've got to get in the ring and subject your ideas to the marketplace of public opinion.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important. And of course, that research leads to strategy, at least marketing strategy, when it comes to understanding the behavior with messaging, channels, where is the audience that you mentioned? What are some examples of some of the marketing that you've seen work really well, on a shoestring budget?
I just talked yesterday with Graham Cochran, who he has grahamcochran.com, and he's an audio guy. And he taught people how to do audio successfully, which in a way is very technical and a hard to market thing. But what he did was he started going on YouTube and doing these very simple videos and built a YouTube channel around it. And he talked about that yesterday on a program I was on, how it really costs nothing, right? You can do it on a phone, you can do it on a computer. Most people in business would have those two things. And he said you don't really need to have very high production quality. These days, people like authentic. It used to be that everything had to be super polished.
Really polished, yeah.
Another person who did that is Evan Fisher. He's a business plan writer who I wrote about in Tiny Business, Big Money. And he basically made his $1 million business by selling business plans and slide decks on Upwork and really dominating that category. But then he started something else called Freelance MVP on YouTube also, where he provides a lot of on-the-ground tips about how to build a successful freelance business. And there's so many people that are freelancers that want to get better at running that business that they've started, or want to dip a toe in the water of freelancing. There's such a big market, and that has, I think, become even bigger than his original business at this point. He has so many fans. I did an event with him for Upwork about a month ago, and I was amazed at the fan base that he built just
That is so cool.
And that's a way to sell other things. Like you can sell coaching, you can sell a course, you can sell many things that way, because what you're doing is you're giving people a taste of your knowledge. And people are always worried, oh, people are going to steal my ideas. But if you're really good at it and you know what you're talking about, no one can copy you exactly.
Well, it's education, right? And we are thirsty as a human race to constantly learn and grow. and, be able to do something new, even if it's the way that we innovate a company we've been, with for 30 years. It's that thirst for knowledge.
Oh, definitely. And people know when you're the real deal or not. They can tell if someone's like a knockoff artist or someone has really put in the work. All the people in this book, for the most part, they didn't get to 1 million in 1 year. It could take years to do that, or to 1 million and beyond. I mean, some of them have gotten as high as like 18 million, but that takes time because you've got to learn all the nuances of your market. There are all kinds of things that can happen with supply chain, with technology, with, different aspects of your business. And it's a journey, but they love it too. I mean, you do have to love doing it.
You do. And that's where, that company that started out as a one-man operation, out of the basement of his home, which is my father, to be able to scale that, definitely to, our size, which is several million, takes marketing. And the company that you just gave the example of that scaled, to 18 million, it takes marketing, it takes pivoting, it takes sales and marketing, by the way. It takes understanding what's happening in the marketplace. It takes differentiation. It takes an integrated strategy to ultimately get you there, to sustain that positive perception that they're building in the marketplace. I'm interested in knowing, because you've interviewed so many people along the transom of growth, at what point did they finally realize, okay, we might need to hire, or, either a full-time marketing person or an outside agency to help us, manage the scaling?
I think that's very individual to the company. I mean, usually it's when the entrepreneur realizes they can't do it anymore. They
can't do it on their own.
They're breaking,
Yeah.
It's funny because one of the entrepreneurs, Patrick Falvey at App Evolve, he said this on one of the events that I moderated: don't be afraid for the pipe to break. And what he was talking about was marketing aggressively on Upwork. In his case, they built an app development company on Upwork, and they really optimized their profile by doing good work. They got a lot of great reviews. They would actually go meet the clients in person. They went above and beyond what you need to do to get work on there. And they got so much work, they needed to hire 30 or 40 contractors to help them. And they realized that they could always hire more people to help them. And they did scale because they were fearless about taking in new business and really leaning into the marketing. And it wasn't like an over-the-top type of marketing. It was things like putting up professional photos on their profile and
what
good
an idea.
Writing. These basic things that people just don't do. It's kind of the knowing doing gap, because let's face it, when you're an entrepreneur, you're so busy, the day goes so quickly, there's always other things going on, and there's some slippage on these things. And it's when you realize you're leaving a lot of money on the table or you're dissatisfying customers that usually entrepreneurs will start handing stuff off. And it's not always even just the marketing. It could be like the marketing plus maybe they bring in a fractional CFO. The ones that really scale do need the help. You can't do everything yourself.
Right.
I mean, now with all the tech tools, maybe we're going to reach a day where you can do a lot more than we think, but
the strategy will always be needed. Yeah, there is a limit, and the strategy will always be something that is so important that in order to have the marketing work, you've got to have the strategy in front of it. Back to the research comment, and that is what AI or technology just is going to be. It's going to be virtually impossible to replace that.
I agree with you. I mean, that stuff can help you if, for instance, you wanted to put up a bio of yourself on your website. Maybe it will like crib together the information, but someone has to still read it and polish it and give it a human touch. Because I know people say you can't tell, but
I think you can. Yeah, I think you can.
Too.
And I think context ends up getting missed with a lot of the AI tools that are out there. We've been playing around with it for months, by the way, well in advance of chat coming into the market. And I am amazed at, I'll get done reading something. It's not all this way, but I'll get done reading something. I'm like, what's the hook? What is it that is really drawing me into this that's going to want me to continue to read more?
Oh, I agree. And I think good marketers can help keep reminding entrepreneurs that the product is about the customer, right? The same way I always tell people a book is not about you. You might be expressing yourself. The book is about the reader. It's a
Right.
conversation. It's not a monologue. Very few people can get away with a monologue, right? Unless you're Tina Fey or somebody like that, right?
Yeah. I
And
mean,
even
there's
she-
something bad in there someplace.
yeah, it's like you've got to be unbelievably interesting for people to just like have you just hit them with the product. You've
Yeah.
got to explain to them why it benefits them in some way, or put it in front of them in a way that will catch their eye. And I view it as a service. The best marketing is putting what you're selling in front of the people who will benefit from it, either because they need it, it's a practical thing, or it'll just add some joy to their life, they want it, and you're really helping them out. You're not bombarding them or misleading them. You're just putting it in front of them in a way that they can understand and take in and take part in if they want to.
Right. I agree. There's so much to celebrate from an entrepreneurialism standpoint in the United States. What is it? And I actually you mentioned the Census Bureau at the very beginning of our conversation. I went to the Census Bureau in preparing for our chat today. There's 33.2 million small businesses, and 9% of them make over $1 million annually. That is a lot of entrepreneurial juice and mindset and just, guts and glory and all those sort of things. And we are a country with the most entrepreneurs of any place else in the world. What is it about the DNA of this country that breeds that?
I think it's the risk-taking spirit in a country that was founded by immigrants, right? And where we celebrate immigration so much. It takes a lot of guts to leave your country.
Yeah.
And maybe, I mean, I don't know where those, I sometimes have wondered if there's something genetic, in terms of the risk-taking spirit that brought those original ancestors and everybody's
So
over
interesting.
here. And if that's
Yeah.
somehow connected to the risk-taking spirit of entrepreneurship, I don't know. I also think that sometimes when people come into a country, if there's a language barrier, it might be hard to get a job initially at whatever level they were at in their original country. So being an entrepreneur, you can probably make more than an entry-level job that you might have to take in a new country.
Right.
To get your sea legs in that country. So it might be a combination of those things, although I don't know. I think it's definitely worthy of study. I've wondered a lot about the entrepreneurial brain, because my theory is there's a spectrum of entrepreneurship that we're all on, from the person who can never take any risks to like Elon Musk, an
Right.
extreme risk taker, take me to the moon. And someone like me is mildly entrepreneurial. I have a freelance business. I make a living this way. I've gone all in with it, but I'm not really trying to scale my business. I'm trying to scale my vision, but I still have kids in the house and stuff. And like you and I talked about, it's not the season of life yet where I can do
Right.
certain things and have peace and not a non-chaotic life. In a year or two, that might be different. But this is where I am right now. There are people that have small businesses where they have a number of employees. They would be at a certain point on the spectrum. They're the startups, that are going out and doing the high rolling in Silicon Valley. We're all part of an ecosystem, but I think we're part of a spectrum. And I've wondered, I would love to know if there are any studies of the brain, if certain parts of the brain are more active in the extreme risk takers.
Yeah.
Sure, there probably is somebody in academia or many people studying this. I just don't know, but I would be super curious to know about that. And, maybe there's some way we can develop that side of ourselves, because we're going into a world where a lot of our institutions are crumbling or in transition.
Yeah.
We just see it. And I think it's an opportunity for creative destruction where maybe the old ways of working just are bursting at the seams and breaking because they were developed for the industrial era. Now we're in this digital era where things are done so differently, and we're just figuring out what they are. And if we could all be a little more entrepreneurial, we'll find opportunity in it instead of feeling like it's all doom and gloom and
Right.
falling apart. Maybe it is falling apart, but maybe it's going to clear space for really great things for all of us.
But it's interesting as you were speaking to all that, I'm reflecting on my own family, and my granddad was an entrepreneur. My uncle was an entrepreneur. My father was, and here I am, he started Avocet, but my granddad and my uncles, totally different businesses. So you have to wonder if it's just a part of the family DNA as well. It'd be interesting also to study, who is a first-time entrepreneur versus an entrepreneur, that has just been from one generation, a generational entrepreneur. I don't even know if that term exists, but you've got to wonder if there's something to that as well. And then you've got to ask yourself, okay, there are a lot of great high schools that have great programs now for entrepreneurship, let alone colleges. And, is that where a lot of first-time entrepreneurs ultimately, or is it the neighbor next door who he saw, being able to come home every day and golf every afternoon? And that was the inspiration behind someone saying, okay, I am going to have my own company someday.
I don't know. I think there is some requirement that you have exposure to it. And
yeah,
I think we're going to find out. I know when I worked at Success Magazine, it was like in the 1990s, and a lot of the universities were just starting to develop their entrepreneurship education programs to the point that they didn't even want to admit that they were teaching it. It was seen as secondary to.
Well, back to the big corporation mindset.
Yeah, and I think that might be in part because the MBA programs, the tuition was being paid by companies a lot of times. Like if you went and worked at an investment bank or something, and then you went back and had a tuition benefit, that would benefit the school. So saying that they were training people to go out and start their own business, maybe would run afoul of that. I don't know, but I think it was also just kind of an academic conservatism at the time. And then they started getting excited about it and promoting it a lot more. And they all started offering it and offering cross-disciplinary programs. And I would love to see, I know they try to track people, but it's kind of hard to track a lot of students over a lifetime. Be interesting to see how much that contributed to entrepreneurship in this country. Maybe someone could reverse engineer it with some of the most successful companies and see if any of the leaders studied entrepreneurship. That's maybe one way to do it. I've thought about that a lot too. But I do think there are other forms of exposure. And what we see now with all the digital tools like YouTube, there could be a teenager in Bangladesh who could get on YouTube and learn about things that maybe they might not be able to afford to go to an entrepreneurship program, or maybe it's not taught in their high school, but they can still learn online and go on LinkedIn and network and do all kinds of things.
The E4Alls of the world, the tech stars of the world. I'm working on a new brand, Catalista, who is trying to bring Filipino Americans into entrepreneurship. So the more, programs that are out there that really bring that spirit alive in people and basically let them know they can do it, I think is really going to help foster a lot of that. I think there's another book idea. It's somewhere in this last 60 seconds for you as well, by the way.
I think so. It's funny because, I think that, Startup Week events, things like that. I do a lot of events with the New York Public Library that have been taken on Zoom, and we get people from around the world. I think the more people come together, because a lot of entrepreneurship is evolving by the minute. And
right.
I find that the community is very generous in terms of sharing ideas and what's working, because everyone knows there's only so much they can do. And, just because you share the email marketing tool you use, it doesn't mean someone's going to take over your whole business. They seem to really like the community. And I think there's also an osmosis factor. Like, you were in an entrepreneurial family. I was cracking up because my son is 13 and he's been around so many interviews. He's been to my book events. One day we were driving along, and we live in suburbia, and he goes, "Mom, I think the people who live around here are risk averse." And it was hysterical. I'm like, what kid would say
My
this?
gosh, I love that.
They're risk
Aw.
averse. And it was
That
like,
would be
it
a
was-
whole nother show, by the way, what the kids have learned in the boardroom, what they've learned. And I'll never forget, I was talking about this recently. I had to, we've got really successful kids. And one of our daughters just became president of her sorority. And she's a sophomore. And I'm just amazed at the tenacity of this girl and the leadership that she has at such a young age. And I'll never forget, I had a meeting, back to entrepreneurialism and lifestyle. I had a meeting that I needed to be at in downtown Denver with the former First Lady of Colorado. And my husband had something happen at work. There was no way he was going to get off early to go get the kids. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to cancel the meeting. I'm going to bring my kids with me. And I walked into the meeting with Francis Owens and Lloyd Lewis and a few other people. And they looked at me and they said, my husband was all over the news that day. Your husband's been, Terry's been busy today. And I said, he sure has. He said, we'll just put them right up here at the table. And they did their homework and they colored three small children at the time. So by osmosis, what they took in those situations, I truly believe, and many of them over their, their years, really has helped form who they are today as these incredible human beings.
That's such a beautiful story. And I think now that so much work is from home, I think more kids getting exposure to what their parents do. It's not even a mystery anymore because they see you, some kids are on the Zoom calls helping people with tech support and things like that. And they're part of things. And who knows where that's going to lead to, because it could be like your parents went off somewhere mysterious. You had no idea what they did. I remember when I was growing up, at that time in my town, not many women worked. So it was like all the dads would walk home down Violet Avenue where I grew up, and you'd see them all like waving. It was very funny. It would be, and people came home at like 5 or 6 o'clock. It wasn't like 8 or 9 o'clock like it is now. And you wondered what your dad did.
Exactly.
Now people know what your mom and dad did.
Well, I tell you, it has been an absolute pleasure, Elaine. You have, the ability to bring the stories of life to the forefront, whether it be from Success and Fortune and Forbes or to your own books now. And we thank you for the inspiration and just bringing these idyllic, stories to the forefront of people and what they do to make ends meet, what they do to show innovation, what they do to provide. It's really something to be, it's something very, very special. And we thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Lori.
What is the best way for people to get a hold of you and buy one of your books?
Well, they can find me on pretty much every social media. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook under my full name, Elaine Pofeldt. It's in the show notes. It's hard to spell, so check it, or you might not find me. And
it's not spelled like it sounds.
No, it's definitely not. It's one of those really long names. Or Instagram is $1 Million One Person Business, and the books are available in all major booksellers, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, et cetera. They're called the $1 Million One Person Business and Tiny Business, Big Money. And I hope you'll write to me. I really love hearing from future and current entrepreneurs about what's on your minds, because it makes me a better journalist and book author if I know what you're interested in finding out. One of the gifts of being a journalist is you get to ask a lot of questions that other people are curious about. And I love storytelling, and I love hearing the stories of real human beings. So also pitch me if you have a great story. And thank you, Lori, for all that you do for the entrepreneurial community and just demystifying marketing for your followers, because it's kind of hard for people to get a grasp on if they're a specialist in some other area, or they're just super busy and don't have time to hunker down and learn it. And the type of education you're providing is really democratizing entrepreneurship for everybody. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate it, Elaine. It's been an absolute pleasure today. And I look forward to following you. I'm going to go sign up right now because you are an inspiration.
Oh, thank you. And likewise, thanks so much.
This episode is complete. Head over to avocetcommunications.com for more ways to scale and grow your business. And be sure to tune in regularly for insights and motivation with host Lori Jones and her guests on the Integrate and Ignite Marketing Podcast.